Hey guys, I'm Lou, and in today's video I am going to be reviewing The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden and telling you guys why it disappointed me. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. I am going to try and make this review as spoiler free as possible, but if you would like to be safe, please click off this video. The summary is as follows. Beware the evil in the woods. In a village at the edge of the wilderness of northern Russia, where the winds blow cold and the snow falls many months of the year, an elderly servant tells stories of sorcery, folklore and the Winter King to the children of the family, tales of old magic frowned upon by the church. But for the young wild Vasya, these are more than just stories. She alone can see the house spirits that guard her home and senses the growing forces of dark magic in the woods. This book has always been on my TBR since I found out about it. It just wasn't high on my to purchase list. But I did want to read it, I just wasn't actively searching for it or buying it. Does that make sense? Like, out of all the books which I wanted to read, this book had a very low priority. I probably wouldn't have read this book for years, but Rachel from Rachel's Library wanted to buddy read it with me. And whilst I do dislike this book, I do acknowledge the fact that this book does sort of have a special place in my heart now, because it allowed me to connect with Rachel and become friends with her. I'll leave Rachel's YouTube channel and her Twitter down below. She is in the process of joining BookTube if she hasn't already, so please do show her some love and welcome her to the community. I ended up finding this book in a charity shop. I was really happy because this is a golden find. Too bad it wasn't treasure. The main reason why this book was so disappointing to me is because there is so much hype around this book. It is definitely a beloved series here on BookTube, but also in the book world in general. But now that I've read this book, I do not understand the hype. To me, it was an okay book, an average fantasy read. I don't understand why people love it so much, but I can understand why people like aspects about this book, because there are parts of it that I did like. My disappointment is not understanding what people see in this book. I do want to know that I did read this story by listening to the audiobook, and perhaps that may have affected my liking of the book, but that wouldn't make much sense because in general, for me, audiobooks elevate stories and my opinions on the book. The added layer of having a narrator perform the story increases my enjoyment of a book. I also have not yet read an audiobook lower than 2 stars, and I have not yet DNF'd an audiobook. The audiobook would both have to have a terrible story and a narrator for me to dislike it that much, which has not yet happened to me. So I don't think reading the audiobook would have negatively affected my opinion on this book and this story, though it does make me wonder how much more I would dislike this book if I had read it physically. Let's talk about the aspects of the book which I disliked. Whilst I will tear apart this book in what I am about to say, I will also say good things about this book later on. The first thing that I instantly disliked was the writing style. The combination of the story being told in third person and a large cast of characters within this book irritated me, especially in the beginning when I had no idea who was who or even what was going on, because this story throws you straight into it from the beginning and you are left with no context and trying to figure out what is going on from the start. I also felt like the writing style prevented me from connecting with the characters. I had no emotional connection to any of them. I think they all could have died and I would not have cared. I would have been okay and not shed a tear. I also wasn't invested in the plot, surprisingly, and I also think this is because of the writing style. There is like a disconnect between the reader and the story. I didn't particularly care about what happened next. I just wanted the story to end. I felt like the pacing was incredibly slow and the plot development was also slow. Both were slow enough for me to want to say that nothing happened, but things did happen. Just very slowly. Key parts of the plot were also repeated. The same obstacles would occur time and time again until the cycle was broken for the ending to occur. The plot is literally,
give Vasya the necklace.
No, she's too young. Please give her more time.
Okay, she has this amount of time.
Then it's repeated like 3 times. When I got to the end, I was so happy that I finished this book. I don't think that's the response you're meant to have when you finish a book. You're meant to be sad. I was happy that this book was over. I could move on with this book, this series, and not feel like I was missing out. The ending was also very anticlimactic. I was not invested to want to continue on with the series, despite the sort of cliffhanger ending. There is one character which I did have an emotional connection with. That was Constantine. The emotion that I felt was revulsion. He gave me perverted priest vibes because of how horny he was around Vassia. I'm pretty sure she's like a teenager and he's an adult. I don't think the age of Vassia was specifically mentioned, but this book was constantly referring to how Vassia is too young to be dealing with forces of evil, so she was probably too young to be dealing with the forces of man. So too young for Constantine. She was sort of set up for an arranged marriage in this book, so it's not like she was incredibly young. It's just if you're constantly telling the readers that this character is young and then you have another character lusting over her, you're gonna think that it's like some perverted vibes. Plus, we know her story from when she was unborn, like literally in the womb of her mother, until she's a teenager. And so it feels really weird having Constantine lust over Vassia. I did not like it. I wanted to say stop. You're supposed to be a man of God. Don't be a pervert. Another aspect of the book which I did not like was that I did not fully understand Vassia's part in the whole story. She's literally like the main character. She is a witch which can prevent a really bad thing from happening, but we don't really know why other than the fact that she's a witch. Would other witches been able to deal with this? Not a teenage girl. Are witches rare? Is that why only Vassia can deal with it? Why is it important? Why is it her family who are witches, and why didn't it go to all parts of her family? Why is it only her that's a witch? Why is it only witches which can defeat bad things? They're literal gods in this book, but they can't do it, but witches can. Can Vassia see the gods because she's a witch or because of another reason? I felt like the story was confusing at times and left me with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. The good things about this book is definitely the atmosphere of a cold Russian winter. If you are an atmospheric reader who likes to read books at certain times of the year, then I would possibly recommend you to read this book during winter or when it's snowing. And whilst I am no means an expert on Russian mythology, it did appear to me that the author is well versed in mythology and adapts at immersing it within her book. The downside to that is that I do feel like this book falls into some fairy tale tropes, like having a wicked stepmother. Overall, I gave The Bear and the Nightingale 3 out of 5 stars. I thought that this was an average fantasy read. It wasn't a terrible book, but it wasn't a good one either. I personally wouldn't recommend this book, especially with all the hype around it. It probably would leave some people feeling very disappointed, like me. I don't see why this book is well loved. If you have an idea, please do tell me. I won't be continuing on with the series for now, but I may change my mind in the future. So that was my review of The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye!